The most famous introduction in music history is probably the beginning of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Everybody knows it, even people who don't like classical music. Dun 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 dun! It's only 4 notes, yet it is so powerful and has such an effect upon the listener. Beethoven reportedly said it was the sound of fate knocking at his door. Dun 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 dun! 3 short notes and 1 long. In Morse code, that's the letter V. How do I know this? Because during World War II, I taught Morse code to American soldiers here in Madison. This is the book we used. Ah, yes, there it is. Dot, 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 dash. V. And V, of course, stands for victory, which is what we are all focused on, victory over the evils of fascism. It may seem a strange connection, Beethoven and Morse, but after all, music is a type of code. The notes on a musical score tell a musician what to play, when to play, and even how to play. Learning to interpret this particular code is one of the joys of being a musician, which for most of my life is what I was. Come to think of it, codes of various kinds have had a strange, powerful influence on my life. Perhaps I should explain. You see, I'm not exactly the person whose name appears on my headstone. It reads M. Elizabeth Park. The M stands for Melba. I was usually referred to as Betsy rather than Elizabeth, but Park is not my original name. My real name is Hamner, and my parents, Walter and Eliza, came from Franklin County, Virginia. They married in 1913 and in quick succession had my older sister Ruth, my brothers Horace and Wayne, and me. I'm not really sure when they moved from Virginia to Wisconsin, but it had to have been sometime between 1917 when Wayne was born and 1920 when I was born. However, within the first year of my birth, both my parents had died of pulmonary tuberculosis at the Wisconsin State Sanitarium, just north of the town of Wales. My father was 42 years old, and my mother, 39. They died within weeks of each other after only 8 years of marriage. Tuberculosis was a terrible disease. Consumption, as it was widely known, had no real cure at the time, and the treatments such as radiation or inserting lead tubes into the lungs were as terrible as the disease itself. My parents must have realized their end was near because they arranged for my siblings and me to be well cared for after their death. No doubt my father's occupation as an attorney had something to do with that. So, in 1921, my brothers were adopted by a family named Byrne in New York State, and my sister Ruth and I were adopted by a childless couple, Charles and Catherine Park, who lived here in Madison. And theirs are the names that appear on my birth certificate, even though my birth is recorded April 20th, 1920, an entire year before my parents' death. I have no explanation for this discrepancy. Well, let's just call it what it was, shall we? A lie. The first of several secrets that caused me to grow apart from my family. I shouldn't be too harsh on them, however. I mean, they didn't have to take me in, and they did so with the very best intentions. For example, when they noticed my musical ability at the age of 5, they paid for piano lessons and encouraged my love of singing. When I attended Central High School here in Madison, where my sister Ruth was also a student, I was involved in all things musical, whether it be choral, instrumental, or raising funds to build a record library. My school photos, I looked rather serious in my jacket, shirt, and tie, but there's a twinkle in my eye that hints at my sense of humor. My senior yearbook photo was accompanied by a quote from the English poet and dramatist George Chapman, a contemporary of Shakespeare. It read, "'Tis good to be merry and wise." I tried to take this philosophy with me as I entered the University of Wisconsin in 1938, where I studied English and German while also continuing my music education. I sang in an a cappella choir, joined the YWCA, and enjoyed the cut and thrust of debate and forensics. I completed my education by earning a master's degree, graduating Phi Beta Kappa with the intent of becoming a professional musician. However, when the United States entered the Second World War in 1941, fate knocked at my door and sent my life into a completely different direction. I'd always possessed an incredible memory and learned new skills in a remarkably quick way. I learned German and French with ease, so it seemed I should put these abilities to good use in the defense of my country. I volunteered in 1942 and was immediately assigned to teach Morse code and telegraphy. I was still a civilian, but I was subject to military rules. I took up my duties at Darwin Station, a newly found base on the east side of Madison, where I taught in Radio School number 3. In November 1941, a young Madison pilot lost his life when his Army Air Force plane crashed into a hillside in bad weather. The following year, Darwin Station was renamed Truax Field in his honor. Lieutenant Bud Truax is also buried in this cemetery. As I split my time between training in Chicago and teaching at Truax, my personal life took second place. I did find time to be my sister's maid of honor when she married, and I attended my mother's funeral when she died in summer of 1945. However, I had begun to grow apart from my family, and when my father died in 1950, I did not attend his funeral. After the war, I took a trip to Egypt where I was entranced by the beautiful hieroglyphics on the ancient temple walls. In 1798, one of Napoleon's soldiers discovered the fabled Rosetta Stone, yet it took another quarter century for a man named Champollion to decipher the true meaning of the hieroglyphs. Codes were clearly nothing new. I continued my music education at every opportunity. I took classes at Manhattan School of Music, Trinity College of Music in London, and Juilliard, where I had the great good fortune to study under Nadine Boulanger. Some of her later students included Aaron Copland, Quincy Jones, and Burt Bacharach, so I was in excellent company. As wonderful as my music education was with Madame Boulanger, it was something she said that had the biggest effect on me. She said, "It is always necessary to be yourself." Well, this struck me in a most profound way, because at that time I was beginning to have new feelings stirring in me. You see, in high school and college, while other girls were swooning over the boys on campus, I had no interest in dating nor any of the other romantic feelings towards men. It was only when I moved to New York City that I realized there was an entire world that had been hidden from me, a world where I could follow Madame Boulanger's advice to be myself. In the 1950s, fate knocked once more. I was working as a choral conductor and organist at various churches in the Manhattan area when I met Marion Vinette Ridgway. She was a writer and publisher, and she had her own literary agency right there on Madison Avenue, which was unheard of for a single woman at that time. We shared a passion for music, books, and art, and very soon we realized we were falling in love. Soon after, we moved in together, and when Marion retired from publishing, we bought a house in Connecticut where we lived for the next 20 years. When Marion died in 1991, I was heartbroken. I had lost the only person I had ever truly loved and who understood me in ways no one ever had. It was painful for me to read Marion's newspaper obituaries. It made me sad and yes, a little angry that we could never live our lives openly and be recognized for who we really were. Our long and loving relationship was reduced to euphemisms like special friend or long-time companions. Codes, it seemed, would always be there to hide the truth. So, in Marion's honor, I established the Ridgway Memorial Award so that other women like us, writers and artists, could feel supported in their bid to become professionals. Well, near the end of my life, I moved back to Madison, but I made no attempt to contact my family. Oh, my sister's son and daughter did reach out to me towards the end, but I declined their invitation to reconnect. I felt it was too late to undo the damage of a lifetime. Perhaps I was wrong. It is said that Shakespeare's life began and ended on the same day. The same is true for me, born and died April 20th. It's as if my life were one long coded message that began and ended with a preconceived signal. If that's true, I'd like to think it meant that I rose above all my life's obstacles, that signal were those 3 dots and a dash. V for victory. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun.